Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Katie and we are going to go beyond the box with the April 2022 Scrawlrbox. And of course I will leave a link to that video at the end of this video, so by all means click on that if you want to have a little recap of what was in that box. Anyway, let's have a little chat about what's going on here. So I decided to keep on with the theme of Walk on the Wild Side, I think it was. And I to be honest, I actually really wanted to do a picture of a tiger, but I've already got a tiger picture planned for another video, so I went for a leopard instead. I marked out all of the leopard spots using that fabulous Unipin brush pen. You know what it was. And it worked out really well applying the ink first rather than attempting to go over the coloured pencils. It was quite a little bit of a time-consuming effort doing all this. I think it actually took me longer to colour all these little spaces in where the spots are than it was to sketch it out in the first place. And I know it's already pre-sketched, but I wanted it to be comfortable when I was doing that picture. But just for the record, it took about 45 minutes, so I guess maybe I'm exaggerating a little with talking about colouring these areas in, but it did feel like it took a long time. And of course, speaking of long time, this is a slightly longer than usual video. I'm probably going to be waffling all the way through it, so by all means, if you don't want to hear what I've got to say as we're going along, I shan't be offended if you press mute and just carry on doing your own thing while this is playing. Coloured pencil work for me takes ages, and I guess for a lot of people as well, it's one of those mediums that do take a while. It's not like throwing a bit of paint down and smushing it all around and introducing colours while it's still wet and getting crazy effects or crazy details, whichever way you feel like presenting your artwork. But for me, it's very, very time consuming, and that's why this video is a little bit longer. After marking all those details out though, it is time to use those gorgeous Chromaflow pencils by Derwent. And again, I feel like the April box, and I know we've had other coloured pencil boxes before, and maybe at the time it just didn't spark anything in me to want to continue, but I do feel like these Chromaflow pencils sort of just reignited a love for using this medium, even if it takes forever. I wanted to mark out the lighter areas after filling in those dark areas, so I didn't press on too hard, but I did add a bit of pressure just around the muzzle of the leopard, as well as a few areas I'd noticed off the reference picture where there were lighter areas in the fur. I know leopards are a sort of yellowy orange colour in general, but they do have some of those little white bits here and there. It's really weird actually watching this back as I'm editing, and it's quite odd to look at it in just the inked stage before I've added the coloured pencils, because how all of the spots lie on the leopard's face, and obviously you've got that neutral mid-tone background. It kind of looked like it was almost completed anyway. I could have left it at that, but this is about the coloured pencils, so I went to town on this one a little bit more than I did for the actual Scrawlrbox video I did. And of course that depth was becoming more and more apparent once I added those white highlights. And again, I actually really enjoyed how many levels of, I guess, for want of better words, tone I could add, or highlights in the case of the white pencil, you could achieve. I could get a good 3 strong different levels of tone. You'd have a very faint one, you'd have something in between, and then if you really press down, obviously you're going to get more of a pigmented mark. Whilst I was using the golden yellowy colour that was provided in Scrawlrbox, it's hard to tell immediately, especially when you're not putting a huge amount of pressure on. It's quite hard to tell where you've actually added the colour and where you haven't until you start adding more layers and more pressure as you go along. I did find though that once I added that yellow and merged it with either white that I put down or went over a yellow area in that white, it brought out this gorgeous vibrancy that really made things stand out. So I definitely used that to my advantage. Now, even though I don't feature it very often on this channel, and I'll be quite honest, it's been a long time since I've dedicated a large amount of time learning and developing my skills with coloured pencils, and I did do a few works, I must say about 8 years ago, where I was really into it, and I've got Prismacolors, and I do plan on doing a video with those at some point. It's not a new set or anything, but I'm happy to do one with that. But I kept using this medium, and then all of a sudden I stopped, and I can never really quite remember why, because I did some really good detailed work and I was really getting to know this medium, and then all of a sudden it kind of just stopped, and I'm trying to pinpoint why that happened, but I can't for the life of me think why. But I did do a pretty wicked dragon picture with them, and I'll have to dig that out and show you guys. I found the raisin colour in this set perfect for mixing with that yellow. It just really brought out a nice orange depth to that colour I'd already laid down, and that was perfect for adding some more depth and obviously pigmented differences within this leopard's fur as well. I think one of the reasons why, for me anyway, it takes so long to do coloured pencil work is getting the flow of the lines, if that makes any sense. So the direction the fur travels across the leopard is not all one direction. I mean, I'm sure if you've got any pets, any furry pets, their facial fur moves all around their eyes and their nose and the mouth, all in different directions. It's not all entirely one, it flows into one direction, but looking face on, it's going to be different, and you're going to have different types of fur as well, and that's something to take into consideration when you're at least trying to get something semi-realistic. Photorealism isn't massively my thing, it just takes far too long, and I don't think I'm kind of good enough to say that I am. But obviously if you want to get some form of realism in your picture, you do have to take those things into consideration, and the direction of fur is most definitely one of them. I do find what helps, so you don't have any of your coloured paper beneath popping through too much, is to just very lightly add a base layer colour, and for me it was that golden yellow colour, maybe occasionally that raisin colour, and just do a very light layer of it, barely to the point where you can see it but you know it's there. Then perhaps just amp it up by the middle pressure that I was talking about earlier, just so that colour becomes a little bit more apparent, but you start using that level of pressure to make some marks, again just to emphasise and highlight where that fur is. Finally, what I find helps as well is an introduction of two different tones. So obviously we've got the white and the raisin, which would pair nicely either side of that yellow, and I would use that just to add a few rogue hairs here and there, just so nothing blended and merged into itself too much. For the fur in the ears, again it was a similar principle. I very lightly added some black to the insides of the ears. Obviously there's a little bit of white there at the moment, and I just decide by looking at my reference picture how much pressure I need to add and how much tone is in there. Once that had got a very light layer down, it was time to start adding some of the lighter sprigs of hair in there. I think I do come back to that a little bit later in the video just to make it a bit more apparent, but as an initial lay down, I just want to get those foundations there, so when it comes to doing those finishing touches, I'm not going in there blind. So why do I suddenly enjoy coloured pencils again? And why did I enjoy them in the first place? Well, I quite like paint, as you know. I like it because it's quite a spontaneous medium if you think about it. Yes, there are certain processes, and of course that makes a huge difference to the outcome of your picture, but I always feel that when you apply paint to a page, it's always a bit of a surprise. especially with watercolours. If you've done a wet and wet technique, it's going to do its own thing, and then you've also got the possibility that it might dry a slightly different tone or slightly different colour than what it went down as. And I kind of like having to, I guess, go along with the processes as the picture develops. I kind of find it the complete opposite with coloured pencils, and to a certain extent you do have to plan ahead. Now, I am no expert with coloured pencils, this is just something I've enjoyed doing, but my personal experience is you have to plan ahead. You really have to decide what colours are going to go where and how you're going to get everything to blend or merge in a cohesive manner without there being too many mistakes. And I know we have an eraser to lift off any mistakes, but sometimes that spontaneous side of me is going to make me make a mark I don't want to make, and it doesn't matter how much you erase at it, you can't fully get rid of it, especially if you've added a lot of pressure. But to slightly contradict what I've just said as well, if you apply it very lightly, just so you've got a rough map of where the colours are going to go, you can lift that up a little bit, and also you can go over it with other colours that should be there, if that makes any sense. I told you this would be a bit of a waffly video. So I guess I'll fill you in a little bit more on my coloured pencil experience. So it was one of those materials that we used in secondary or high school, especially when we were doing our final exams, which would be like our GCSEs over here in the UK. I'm sure they're probably called something different now. And I remember a lot of the coursework for the art GCSE involved sketchbook work, and most of the time that would be coloured pencils. And I'll be honest with you, the coloured pencils provided weren't the best, and for me they just didn't seem quick enough to get the job done, and I kind of refused to use them after a while, and I bought my very first ever kit of watercolours and used them instead, and probably just didn't touch them for many years after. In college, we were encouraged to use as many different materials outside of the norm as possible, so coloured pencils weren't used very often, maybe for concept sketches, but in my experience, not very often at all. And outside of that, I'd say I went back to life drawing classes in 2009, and most of that was pencil and graphite work, maybe charcoal, but I'm not a massive fan of that. And I decided to start taking coloured pencils then, and I would fleet in and out of these life drawing classes because they weren't a prescribed course or anything, but I do remember picking up my first set of Prismacolors and taking them along with me, and then buying a Derwent, I guess it was a skin tone set, I can't remember though, the packaging's long gone and most of the colour pencils have been used up now, but I thought they were fantastic because they were so soft and they'd get the colour down so quickly. They were just perfect for life drawing, so I definitely continued using them there. And it's quite strange really, because for some reason in life drawing I could do coloured pencil work really quickly. I mean, I wish I could show examples here on YouTube, but I don't think YouTube likes anatomical studies, we'll say, so that might have to be something you have to research on my Instagram account. But in contrast to all that, I actually find that painting and life drawing to be more of a challenge, so I've kind of gone back to doing that now whenever I go to these classes. But it's really strange how, at least in my opinion and my experiences, how my need to use this material sort of varies from what subject I'm doing. And especially for YouTube videos, they take a long time to do. I'd say in total this picture took me about, I want to say about 3.5 hours, which that's a long time. And don't get me wrong, I've spent just as long on paintings that I've done on this channel, but for some reason with coloured pencil it just seems to take longer. I don't know why. And it's not as if I don't enjoy it, because it's such a planned out piece. I find it quite cathartic. I feel like I can switch off once I know where the colours are going. But anyway, that's enough waffling about that for now. I'm sure I'll have another coloured pencil video ready for you at some point where I can waffle some more. And let's talk a little bit more about what's going on here. So As you can see, the majority of everything is mapped out. I've just got to finish the leopard's chest, but I've already added a light layer of that white down, and I'm just going around the face and just adding different levels of tone. I do try and avoid using the black pencil for shading. For me, I would prefer to use other colours before that, but obviously the leopard's spots are black, so to a certain degree it's nice to be able to extend them fur lines a little bit more outside what I'd done with the initial ink. Now we're at the stage where it's all coloured pencils, it's nice to just be able to merge them in together. It's most definitely softened those lines up a little bit without making this leopard look too furry and fluffy. I like to think that I've maintained these fur textures in there. And as you can see as well, I had to keep sharpening the pencil. For me, having a sharp pencil was really important. I don't mind it getting a little bit blunt for layering the areas, or perhaps somewhere where I really want it to stand out and I don't want to snap the lead. Not that I had many issues with these at all, as I mentioned in the scrawler video. But yes, the key to me was to keep sharpening those pencils and to keep having a nice sharp point to work with. Any areas which required, I guess, a layer, not a heavy layer, but a layer, I would just tilt the pencil on its side. You've got a larger surface area and you can cover that area without having to add too much pressure or having to keep sharpening your pencil unnecessarily. Obviously, the last thing to do were the whiskers on here, and I always find things like that stressful because I've got one chance to get it right, and yeah, if it doesn't look right, that's there forever, and I don't particularly want to have to lift up all of those layers I've put all that time and effort into beforehand. But we are pretty much done after this stage. Apart from just adding a few other highlights here and there, we are pretty much done. And I really enjoyed doing this. Even though it took me such a long time, I still really enjoyed it. Now, I have started another coloured pencil video. I do have a confession. I bought some Castle Arts coloured pencils and it's going to be quite a long video. So if you do want me to turn this picture into a video, please let me know. Anyway, the Scrawlrbox video is on screen right now, as well as another that I think you'll like. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you lovely lots soon. Bye!